Hey guys, welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Dennis Fields. Today we're going to be going through a Mexican Cerveza. So you can do this in a couple of different ways, and I'm going to show you a standard recipe that you could make a kind of faux lager like I'm going to do. You can make a traditional Mexican lager, or you can just do it with an ale yeast. This recipe can be used for basically all three of those, and you can kind of tailor it to your liking. So for instance, in my video today, we're going to be making kind of a faux lager. We're using ale yeast, but kind of fermenting it at colder temperatures, around 57, 58 degrees. But we're going to be also adding some chili peppers, not for really the heat, but really for the flavor at the end of this one. I did a similar version of this called chips and salsa, where I had to showcase some salt in that beer. That was kind of a competition that needed to have that salt flavor. I'm not going to be adding salt into this one, but I am going to be doing a similar recipe. So for the ingredients that I use in this one is pretty simple. I use a Pilsner and a 2-row for base malts. I use a Munich malt, a light Munich malt. That's going to give it this kind of bready tortilla flavor. We also throw in, to help with that, some flaked maize. This is 3 pounds of flaked maize, so we'll have that in there. And then I also throw in about a quarter pound or so of rice hulls, just so we don't get a stuck sparge during our batch sparge process. We're going to be trying to hit a mash temperature of about 152 or so, which will give us that kind of balanced profile between letting some of these grains and flaked maize kind of shine through in the body of the beer, but also allowing for, you know, that crisp, refreshing taste. If I was to err on one side or the other, I would err on the lower side of this one. I'm not real malty because, you know, Mexican lagers and faux lagers are meant to be clean and crisp style beers. And so if I'm a little bit short of the 152, I'm definitely okay with that, even as low as, you know, 149. So with that, we're going to get our malts milled. I'm going to get our strike water ready. I'm going to put our water additions in there. If you haven't watched my most recent video on, you know, adjusting your water pH and your water salts to make better beer, go ahead and do that. That's important in this one, where we're going to be adding, at least in my water profile, calcium chloride, gypsum, and Epsom salt. I also will be using a little bit of lactic acid to drop the mash pH down to an acceptable range of about 5.3 pH for your mash. So with that, hit that like and subscribe button, grab yourself a beer, and let's get after it. All right, our strike water is ready. We're gonna go ahead and mash in. I've already added my salt additions to the water. And I added my rice hulls right to my grain bucket here. So those will go in first. We'll get it stirred around. Then we'll add our lactic acid to drop the pH down. In my case, I'm using 5 milliliters. So we'll get this good and stirred in. We'll add our lactic acid, and then we will take a temperature reading, see how close we are. Again, we're expecting to get about 152 or so. Again, if you ever overshoot this, add an ice cube. It's easier to overshoot than undershoot, because then you don't have to add any boiling water or anything like that to raise it up, and don't mess with your volumes all that much. All right, that's good and stirred in. Lactic acid. And then our temperature reading here, see where we're at. 151.4, so I think that's perfect. I did feel a couple dough balls, so I want to make sure we get those out of there. Smash those up against the wall quick. But yeah, 151.4, that's perfect. I mean, I didn't want to go over 152, and I said we could err a little bit light if we needed to, which is right on the money. So go ahead and get this lid on, and we'll let that rest now for 60 minutes. All right, while our mash is doing its thing in here for 60 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and get our hop additions ready. We're also gonna be adding a Werflock tablet. This will help clarify your beer. You know, this style beer should be, you know, a clear, crisp, refreshing Mexican, either lager or faux lager or ale that you're making. And so it should be light, clean, crisp, right? So that will help clear up that beer, make it less cloudy, and overall drop out some of those proteins to help reduce any off flavors. We are going to weigh out some hops. In this case, we are going to be using Sabro, a 1/2 ounce at 60 minutes. That's going to be our bittering addition. We're also going to be using an ounce of Sabro at 5 minutes left in the boil. So we're going to weigh those out. And then I'm also using kind of a unique hop that many of you probably haven't used before called Motueka Hops. These are a New Zealand hop. They give off like a lime flavor. And so we're kind of going for that kind of Fiesta, Cerveza type of beer. And so this one will help give it that lime flavor. We got the chili peppers going in for that chili flavor with a little bit of heat, not much. And then the tortilla kind of flavor with the maize and the Munich malt will give it kind of that bready tortilla flavor. And so that should be amazing. And that should kind of round off and, you know, really play well together at the end of the day with the finished beers. All right, it's time to start our recirculation process. We're going to go ahead, give this a quick stir around, do our recirculation / vorlaughing, if you want to call it that, and then do our batch sparge, which we have our water already heated up, and we'll dump that in and give it a 20-minute rest. If you haven't checked out one of my videos before, I use this recirculation tool to help me with my vorlaughing process so I can keep recirculating. If you haven't seen that, go ahead and check that out. I'll have that in the link description below. All right, it's been about 15 minutes for our batch sparge, so between 15 and 20 minutes, that should be plenty. We're gonna mix this up, do our same vorlaughing process, and then get to our final runnings, which I believe is somewhere around 7 gallons or so. All right, guys, we are getting up to our 7.2 gallons, which is what we are supposed to have. So even though there's just a little bit left in this thing, it's starting to bubble out right now, actually, so it's perfect amount. We're gonna go ahead, shut that off, get this thing heated up, start our boil process. All right, we're getting close to boiling here. I'm going to add this Firm Cap S, which helps prevent boilovers both when you get up to a boil and when you are adding hops. All right, we're getting up to a boil here. Turn that down a little bit. Make sure we don't boil over. And then we're going to add our 1/2 ounce Sabro hops here. And today, because I only have a couple of ounces, I'm going to actually use my hop spider here. If I was using, you know, more than what I'm using today, probably anywhere more than 1.5 ounces in the boil, I'd probably use my DIY hop spider with the paint strainer bag, but in this case, I'm just going to use my metal one. All right, once we're confident that that is back up to a good rolling boil and that it's not going to boil over, I'm going to go ahead and add our 1/2 ounce of Sabro. Love the smell of those. Going to give it a good mix around to the pot, and then once inside of the container here, get all them oils out. Again, watching that for boil over. If we need to turn down, I don't think I need to, but it might be creeping up there. Oh, there you go, under control. That's our Firm Cap doing its thing. I didn't have to touch it. Had me worried there for a minute. Now we're going to let this boil down, and we will be back to add a Werflock tablet and our 5-minute additions. All right, guys, we got about 15 minutes left in the boil. We're going to go ahead and add our Werflock tablet. We do have one more hop addition before the end of the boil, and then we're going to add some whirlpooling, which I'll go through after this. All right, we're getting to the end of our boil here. About to add our 5-minute hop addition. It's 1 ounce of Sabro. One last good sniff, and we're going to dump her in. As our last 5 minutes is wrapping up in the boil, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I whirlpool. If you do not have a pump or a electric system where it keeps it's a constant temperature and where you're circulating. What I like to do is I like to chill my wort. No matter how you do it, I'm going to use an immersion chiller. I'm going to chill that down to about 180-ish degrees, maybe a little bit higher, and then I'm going to stop my wort chiller. I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to dump in my 2 ounces of Motueka hops. I'm going to let that sit for 15 minutes. And when I put those in, I'm going to give it a good stir. I'm going to raise that hop spider in and out, get those oils all moving around. I'm going to do that a couple of times during the Whirlpool 15-minute hop stand. And so the reason I stopped it a little early, even though I want to be at about 170 Whirlpool, I'm going to stop it at 180 because moving those things in and out, adding the hops, stirring it around is going to ultimately bring down that temperature gradually. And as it sits for that 15 minutes, it will go from that 180 to about 170 anyway. And so I want it to be kind of in that range. And so I'm going to stop it a little early, add my hops, stir it, and then let it do its thing for 15 minutes. Again, getting those oils out, and then we're going to chill it the rest of the way down to fermentation temperature. All right, it's already at 180 degrees. I shut the water off. I'm going to pull out my immersion chiller. This again is cooling it as we're doing this. Pull this back out, hook that back up. I'm going to put my Whirlpool hop additions, again 2 ounces of Motueka hops in here. I'm going to give it a good stir around, both inside and outside of my hop spider. And I'm going to put the lid on it, let it sit for 15 minutes. I'm going to let these oils get out of there. And a couple of times I'm going to pull this thing up and down with my hot pad here. I'm going to take these, lower it up and down, let those oils kind of drain out of there, because this thing can get a little clogged up with a lot of hops, but this isn't a terrible amount this time. I'm going to get those oils out of there. All right, now we're going to let that sit in there. Put my cover on and let it sit for 15 minutes. Just during that time while I was messing around, it went just about 170 degrees. All right, once your hop stand is over, or hop Whirlpool stand is over, just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and just sanitize this down. You don't need to. It's over 150 degrees still, so shouldn't kill anything, but just in case, go ahead and take off our lid, and we're going to cool it down like we normally would down to fermentation temperature. All right guys, we are done with the cool down. We're going to go ahead and transfer this into our fermenter. It's under 80 degrees, probably 72 it looks like ish. And this will just cool it down further as we're transferring this in. We are using US-05 yeast today, and that's a great yeast to do kind of a faux lager. That yeast will ferment at lower temperatures than other ale yeast will, and it will give those kind of lager-esque kind of flavors. And so I'm going to be pitching 1 packet of US-05, not a real high gravity beer or anything, so 1 packet should be just fine. We're going to ferment that at 58 degrees. 57, 58 degrees would be about optimal for that kind of faux lager taste. You're still going to get that clean up at the end with that. But you can do this as a lager. If you want to actually take this and actually do a true lager yeast, you can definitely do that. It's no problem at all. If you want to use just a regular ale yeast and try a different, Mexican ale type of yeast, that's absolutely fine too. You can also take US-05 and just use it at regular fermentation temperatures. That's also acceptable. So I'm going to go ahead, finish transferring this one. This is helping to oxygenate the wort so the yeast can do its job. We're going to take one last refractometer reader, make sure we're hitting our final gravity here, which we're looking at, I believe, is 1050, 1.050. And so we'll see how close we are there. And then we're going to get this thing cooled down, pitch our yeast, and we'll be ready to go. I'm actually going to probably pitch this a little higher than fermentation temperature is actually going to go, because that'll actually help get that yeast started. But this will, quickly cool down in my fermentation chamber. So go ahead and get the last of this guy out of here. Close that off. Grab a sample. I have my yeast packet and scissors already sanitized, so I'm going to go ahead and get that put in right away. Sprinkle that right on the top. I'm going to put that in my fermentation chamber, drop my tilt hydrometer in there, and then I'm going to give it a good kind of rocking back and forth, get that yeast all stirred up, and we should be ready to go. All right, and we're done with the brew day part of the Fiesta Cerveza. And so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna let this thing ferment out for a week, right? After fermentation gets done, I'm gonna go ahead and use some poblano peppers. I'm gonna coat them just over the very top of the peppers in a little tiny bowl with some vodka. That'll kill off any of the bacteria or things and pull out some of those pepper juices, right? And so I'm using poblanos that does not have very much heat. You can use jalapenos, you can use habaneros, you can use whatever kind of pepper that you want. I'm going for that chili flavor with a little bit less heat, and so I'm going to choose to use that one. I might, if I want to, throw in a couple of jalapenos to see if I get a little bit more kick, but I can always do that after the fact. So you can't go backwards, you can always go a little bit more later on. So what I would suggest doing is starting the process a little bit light and then adding peppers if you want to. Also, when I add the peppers, I put them in a little tiny paint strainer bag, and then I put those into the secondary for 2 to 3 days maximum. And so you want to test it after a couple of days. If it's to your liking, pull them out, right? You can always add more, you can't take it out. And so peppers are not something that you want to leave in for an entire week unless you use very, very little. But in my case, I would use a certain amount of peppers, pull them out after a couple of days. Then I would cold crash and keg it after that. All right, guys, this is a perfect beer for Cinco de Mayo coming up. Go ahead, put this one on your list to brew. If you have any questions, comments, leave them in the video description below. With that, hit that like and subscribe button. Happy brewing, and cheers. Thanks for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. Another couple ways that you can help support the channel is by hitting that like and subscribe button. You can also check out the merchandise in our store. I have other shirts. We got glassware, we got stickers, hats, sweatshirts, etc. Go check it out. Also, hit that video here. You know you want to.